Well, the colder weather might be good for Aspen, but not good news for most Americans from Texas to New England. Millions now facing the threat of rolling blackouts as winter approaches. The White House is yet to address this issue because they're not serious right now, but essentially leaving Americans out in the cold.
For more, we are joined now by former chairman of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission under President Trump, Neil Chatterjee. Hi, Neil, clearly, we know it's President Biden's policies that led us to this scenario.
Or lack of.
Or lack thereof. I mean, what can be done about it at this point?
We need more infrastructure in the U.S. We need permitting reform. We need to make it easier to build energy infrastructure in this country. The country's going through an incredible energy transition right now, but the folks in the Biden administration want to skip the transition part of the energy transition. And the end result of that, we saw it in your last segment. It's really, really dangerous when the power goes out, when it's freezing cold outside.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, is all these high-life Hollywood celebs who drive their Tesla and stuff like that, the second their heater goes off, they're going to be like, they're going to get on their private jet, they're going to burn a ton of carbon footprint, they're going to go to Mexico because it's going to be nice and warm there. But, Neil, if I will say this to anybody who will listen, the government doesn't create anything. They can incentivize other people to create stuff, but outside the atom bomb and the Manhattan Project, they haven't really created anything substantial. So why doesn't, if they want to transition us, why don't they incentivize it? Why don't they come, if Joe Biden comes to the podium today and says the first, American-based company employing Americans that invents a clean, reliable, renewable energy source equal to, comparable, or greater than fossil fuels will pay no taxes for, 20 years.
But then that would hurt China's economy. That's where we're getting the solar panels and the batteries from.
But don't you think that's, what a fool I was. But don't you think that would incentivize this transition quicker?
Yeah.
Well, here's the problem. You're right. Government doesn't create anything, but government can block things. And that's what's happening right now. My former colleagues at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission are making it harder to build natural gas pipelines in this country. They're making it harder to build liquefied natural gas export facilities, which would help our allies in their moment of peril. We need to make it easier to build things. You can incentivize new technology for sure. Congress just did that, $369 billion in tax incentives for the clean energy transition. But we still have to build stuff. You know what? If we don't build transmission lines in this country to get that clean energy onto the grid, that $369 billion might as well just been flushed down the toilet.
And Neil, can you talk about the EPA regulations as well? Because they say, oh, there's all these oil leases and Exxon is choosing not to partake in it. And by the way, when they say like these big oil companies are getting rich off the high gas prices, they don't realize it's not just one CEO sitting behind a big old desk. It's actually shareholders. So it's just there's so many misnomers, so much misinformation coming out of the Biden administration. But ultimately, like you just said, it's the EPA. It's all these regulations that are strangling the productivity that we could be having here.
Here's the tragedy of the whole situation. EPA regulations, Biden administration rhetoric, they're going after American oil companies and demonizing them while simultaneously trying to make nice with the Saudis and begging them to increase production because they're trying to satisfy their environmental base. The reality of the situation is we do it cleaner and better than anyone else in the world. If we increase domestic energy production, not only would it be good from an economic standpoint, from a national security standpoint, it's actually better for the environment as well.
Neil, part of that massive spending bill that was passed, like however, I'm losing count of the trillions of dollars we've spent, but part of that guaranteed to open new oil leases. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. You were talking about the EPA. The EPA is not approving the permits. Why don't we just line the, I mean, look, they're putting these huge 600-foot tall ugly windmills all over the seaboards. Why don't we line San Diego to Seattle with oil rigs off the coast and drill, baby, drill?
Because the federal government will not permit us to access our own domestic resources. Again, the agency I used to run, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, if we approve pipelines. If the pipelines aren't there to ship the fuel, then it doesn't even matter if you can build those rigs and extract it or not. We've made it way too hard to build anything in this country.
Speaking of shipping, trains, I got about less than a minute left, but I mean, they transport a third of our goods. A lot of them run on diesel generators.
And we're about to potentially confront a rail strike in this country. The Americans are feeling the pressure of inflation in their pocketbooks. We're coming up on Christmas. Can you imagine if we have a rail strike on top of everything else? It's just a potentially devastating situation. And yeah, pipelines can move liquid fuels more efficiently than rail cars.
And cleaner and safer. I just don't understand. Everything that the Biden administration does, America loses and our adversaries win. I just don't understand.
But the interesting part about these diesel shortages, Neil, is that you have a lot of people in places like Manhattan. They're not affected by this because they don't understand
they're not affected.
Yeah, their stuff comes on trucks, but they don't drive trucks, so they don't understand. In Manhattan, we talked about this yesterday. 2.4 million pounds a day of poo will be stacked up because trains export it every single day. That's a lot.
You like saying that word.
Yeah. That's a problem. All right, Neil Chatterjee, always a pleasure.